Okay, for this case, I'm gonna work questions 3 through 6, but I'm gonna be working 2 lectures in one. Okay. One of our questions, I'm just asking for the vertex and the opening. I know for assignments yesterday, we noticed that the first digit, when the first digit was positive, the U was open up. And when the first number was negative, the U was open down. That's something pretty cool that we saw. So for the first thing, I'm asking for the vertex. Now, one pretty cool thing here. I'm looking at question number 3. And I'm just going to be asking for the first lecture, I'm going to be asking for the vertex and the opening. Now, people might be wondering, what is that thing called vertex? What's that? Okay, so yesterday we started looking at quadratic equations. They look like U shapes. Some of the U's were open down, and some of the U's were open up. Let me erase this. Let me do a better job. Okay, so again, some of the U's were open up, and then some of the U's were open down. When it is open up, the vertex is this lowest point. And when it is open down, the vertex is this highest point. That's what we call the vertex. So looking at our equation on question number 3, my vertex for this case is going to be 1, positive 3. So I could even graph it. I could graph this really quick. I could just do my vertex is right here, 1, 3. Now, you guys might be wondering, how did he get this? From inside the parentheses, look at the number that I was given. There was a -1, right? A -1. I changed the sign. So my X value is going to be the opposite of that. So if it was -1 to begin with, +1, that's my X value. If it was +1 to begin with, then I would have called it -1. Now my Y value is going to be this number out here with the sign included. I'm only going to switch the sign on the X value, not the Y value. And then the opening, I'm just asking, is it open up or is it open down? I always take a look for the opening. I take a look at the first number. Okay, there's nothing in front of the parentheses, but what is it, the number we imagine when it is in front of the parentheses? When there's nothing, we imagine a 1, right? In this case, a +1, right? Because that is a positive number. So in reality, I'm just looking at the sign. Because that's a positive number, I'm going to say my opening is up. So it's a U shape that is open up. So right now I have a rough idea. It's going to look something like this. I find my vertex and I know it's open up. We'll talk about the graphing in a little, but for the first assignment, I just want you guys to give me the vertex and the opening. So let's take a look at question number 4. I'm looking for the vertex and the opening. Remember that for the X value on the vertex, I look inside the parentheses. There's a +3. So my X value is going to be -3. Remember to change the sign. Now, the number at the end appeared, I see nothing. So that's basically a +0. Right? I see nothing there. So it's going to be 0. Oh, I can even plot that one in. I can find the vertex is right here. And in this case, the opening, I look at the sign, I look at the number at the very beginning. In this case, is negative, so it is open down. So I have a good idea that this thing might look like this, right? It looks like a U shape open down. Again, we'll talk about the graph later. So right now, I just want us to know the vertex and the opening. Let's take a look at question number 5. I'm working on the vertex and opening. Okay, inside the parentheses, oh, I see nothing, right? Technically this is the parentheses here because it's everything to the squared. So my x value is 0 because I don't see an x value there. My y value is here, so my y value is 3. So my vertex, have a good idea, it's about there. My opening, so I see the sign at the very beginning. I see a number that is a negative 1/3. In reality, I just care about the sign. It's a negative number. So because it's a negative number, this thing is going to open down. So again, I have an idea. It looks something like this. But we'll talk about that later. And then question number 6. Remember, I'm just looking for, at this moment, I'm looking for the vertex and the opening. So for the vertex, I see inside the parentheses, there's a -4. So my x value is +4. Gotta switch the signs. For my y value, it's a -1. Remember, I only switch the sign on the x value. The opening, again, I look at the first number. It's a fraction, it's a 1/4. But I'm just looking at the sign, positive or negative. It's a positive. So in this case, the opening is up. The vertex in this case is right here. And I have an idea that this thing might look something like that. It's opening up. But I said I was going to do 2 assignments, right? So the first assignment is vertex and opening. That's all we're looking at. The second assignment, I'm going to ask you for the maximum or minimum value. So max or minimum value. And then I'm going to ask for the x-intercept. Okay, so looking at here, maximum or minimum. So I have an idea. Remember for this question, I know where the vertex is, and I have an idea that this thing is opening up. So I have an idea that it looks something like that. I might be a little bit off. We'll talk about later how is it when we get off, when we were actually more precise. But right now, just knowing the vertex and knowing the opening, I have an idea how the graph looks like. Now, the maximum or minimum value. The maximum, I know this thing keeps on going up. Notice how I did it with arrows. So it goes up forever. So I have no idea what the maximum value is. It goes on forever. Infinity is not quite a number. It's a representation of something really big. So in this case, my vertex represents my minimum value. My vertex represents my minimum value. What's the y value of our vertex? Our y value of our vertex is +3. So when I ask maximum or minimum, I want you guys to know is the minimum because this thing is open up and the y value is 3. Now my x-intercepts. For the x-intercepts, what I mean with that is looking at the x-axis, where are the values? What are the values when you cross the x-axis? Well, you guys are going to be like, well, I don't. I don't cross the x-axis. Well, in this case, we don't. So in this case, we don't. So we're going to say none. Make sure you capitalize the N. I don't cross the x-axis. Okay. Now let's take a look at question number 4. Remember how we know the vertex -3, 0, and we have the opening. This thing looks down. So roughly I know how the graph looks like. First thing I'm asking is maximum or minimum? Maximum, minimum value. And then I'm going to ask for the x-intercepts. Okay, so for first, maximum, minimum. So my vertex, does this represent the highest point value or this represent the lowest point value? In this case, because the aperture is going down, the parabola is up and down, this represents the maximum value. Now, because notice how everything is lowered. So now what's the y value on our vertex? My maximum value in this case is 0. Now, x-intercepts. Remember, for the x-intercepts, I'm looking at the x-axis. Where are the points where we actually cross the x-axis? Well, I see one point right there. We crossed it at one point. So my x-intercept in this case is -3. Okay, so far, we've seen 2 examples. Maximum or minimum. When it is open up, it is our minimum value. When the parabola is open down, it's a maximum value. And x-intercepts are the values where I cross the x-axis. So we saw in question number 3, there were none. We didn't cross the x-axis. For question number 4, we crossed it at one point because we saw exactly one point. Okay, let's take a look at question number 5. So we see the values here. So remember, I'm going to ask first of all for the maximum or minimum value. Maximum or minimum value. I know where my vertex is, 0, 3. And this thing opens down roughly like this. Same roughly. I could be a little bit off. But I'm just looking at it looks opening down. So this case, this is a maximum value. And my maximum value here is +3. Now, I want us to know the x-intercepts. So looking at the x-axis, it seems like I'm gonna cross the x-axis twice. So I drew what I thought the graph would look like. So now I'm actually gonna do a better value, a better work here. I'm gonna create my table here. Let's use blue for our table. I'm gonna create a table of x and y values. My vertex is 0, 3, right? I'm gonna put it right here somewhere in the center. 0, 3. And I could go to the sides. I could go lower numbers, so -1, -2, -3, -4, as far as I need to go. And then to the other sides, 1, 2, 3. Notice how my x values, starting from the vertex, I put my vertex somewhere in the center. I started to subtract 1. So that's how I came out with -1, -2, -3. Starting from the vertex, the x value 0, I started adding 1. 1, 2, 3. I'm really looking for what are the x values that give me a y value of 0. So let me try 1. What would be the y value if your x is equal to 1? So remember, I'm looking at y is equal to -1/3 times 1 squared plus 3. That's really what I'm doing, because that's how the equation looked like to begin with, right? So let me work things out. I know I have to work the exponents. So 1 squared is 1 times 1, so that's 1, times a negative 1/3. Oh man, that's gonna give me a fraction. And a fraction plus 3 is gonna be ugly. So this is fraction. My answer here is a fraction. I'm not interested in this. I'm really interested in when is this thing gonna give me a 0? That's really what I'm interested in. Okay, so 1 didn't quite work. How about 2? So I'm gonna write the equation as y is equal to a negative 1/3 2 squared plus 3. Notice how I put a 2 for my x. So what's the with the exponent 2 squared? That gives me a 4, right? 4 times a 1/3. Oh man, that's also gonna give me a fraction. So I'm not worried about this one. So what about 3? Okay, 3 squared is 9, right? Because 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 1/3. Oh, that's a negative 1/3. Let me think of that. Negative 1/3 times 9 over 1. That is equal to a negative 9 over 3, which is negative 3. So all this became negative 3. So a negative 3 plus 3 is 0, right? Ah, there it is. I was looking for the x value that will make my y equal to 0. When x equals 3, y is equal to 0. Now, one thing really cool. There's something really, really cool. You notice how when we tried 1, we got a fraction. This happens to repeat on the other side of the vertex. So here I'm also going to get a fraction. When we tried 2, we got a fraction. So here a negative 2, it's also going to become a fraction. When x was 3 gave me a 0, it's going to repeat on the other side. So when x equals negative 3, I'm also going to get a 0. Okay, so I have a better idea. I'm going to say my graph looks like that. So I have a better idea how my graph looks like. My x-intercepts, what are the values when I cross the x-axis? Oh, there's two values, right? A negative 3 and a positive 3. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write both of them. I'm going to write the small one first, and I'm going to include the word and. So my answer will be negative 3 and positive 3. Okay? So do notice that I included both the negative first. Why the negative first? Because look on your x-axis, isn't that negative 3 first? Like it's on the left. All right, let's do one more question like this. So question number 6, we know the vertex is 4, negative 1. We know this thing opens up. So roughly, I'm gonna say this might look something like this. So it seems like I'm gonna cross the x-axis twice. So I should do a better job. I'm not gonna estimate this. So first of all, we're gonna do maximum or minimum value. Because it's open up, again, I have a picture, an idea. This thing looks like this. Because it's open up, this is my minimum value. And negative 1. Remember, I look at the y value. My vertex, the minimum value is negative 1. Now it's asking me for the x-intercepts. And I'm going to assume that there's going to be two values, right? I'm going to cross the x-axis at two values. So let's create a table here. of X and Y values. The vertex was 4, -1. So 4, -1, I put it somewhere in the center. So X values, starting at 4, let me subtract the 1. So it's going to be 3, 2, 1. Starting at 4, let me add 1. So it's going to be 5, 6, 7. In my equation, it says that it's going to be, to begin with, it's going to be Y is equal to 1/4 X minus 4 to the second power minus 1. If I plug in the 4, my Y value, so if I change my X for 4, my Y value will end up being -1. I can assure you that. Now, what happens if I change my X value for a 5? Because I'm checking this first number. So it's going to give me 1/4 times 1 squared minus 1. So I look at the exponents. 1 squared is 1. 1 times 1/4 is a fraction. Minus 1. Okay, so this is going to give me a fraction. So I'm not going to look at that. So therefore, I'm going to say if x equals 3, it gives me a fraction as well. I'm not really interested in any value. I'm interested in the value of x that's going to give me a 0 for my y. That's really what I'm interested in. Some of you might be wondering, Mr. Leonzo, what's that actual fraction that you get? Okay, you guys want to try this out? You happen to get -3/4. Okay, so that one didn't work, right? What if I plug in x equals 6? So you notice I'm going to try it here. So that gives me 1/4 times 2 squared minus 1. Notice I did 6 minus 4 inside of parentheses. That's how I got the 2. So I had to do my exponents first. 2 squared is 4, right? Oh, okay. So we're looking at something here. 1/4 times 4 minus 1. Okay, 1/4 times 4 is 0. It's 1. 1/4 times 4 is 1 minus 1 is 0. So it gives me a 0 here and a 0 here. I found my x-intercepts. My values are 2 and 6. I have a better idea how this picture looks like. Pretty open here. And I'm going to say it's going to go somewhere about here. Remember, I'm interested on the x-axis. I see 2 values here. So my x-intercepts are going to be 2 and 6. Remember, you had to write them in from small to large. So a couple of things on just on the x-intercepts. Question number 3, we had none because we didn't cross the x-axis at all. Question number 4, we only had one x-intercept because we crossed the x-axis. We touched the x-axis only at one point. But questions 5 and 6, you had 2 values for the x-intercepts. Make sure you write them from small to large. Notice how when I had 2 of them, so I'm looking at questions 5 and 6, I had the 2 numbers, but I also included the word and in between them. So that's really what you guys are going to be typing in. So if it was number 5 for the x-intercept, I'll be typing -3 and 3. Don't forget the space before the word and after the word and, right? Don't forget those spaces. Okay, so again, this covers two of your lectures.